Everyone, my name is Justin Hahn. This is my Module 1 School Level Governance Fiscal Responsibilities of School Principals for Building Finance. I have to start off just because it has to be known I am actually not in the United States right now. My fiance and I, we are on vacation with our families in, you have to wait and see, beautiful Cancun. So it is kind of bittersweet right now doing this assignment. Bitter because I'm having to do the assignment. Sweet though that I get to at least see the ocean as I'm talking about building finance. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about my educational journey. I graduated in 2016 from Kansas State University with my bachelor's in elementary education. Right after I graduated, I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where I started my teaching career. I started teaching fifth grade, and then after that, I moved to a double accelerated middle school math course. Once COVID hit, I did decide to move back to Kansas to be closer to family, and that's where I began teaching third grade in the Derby School District. I'm excited this upcoming year. I will be serving as an instructional coach for the Derby School District at an elementary school called El Paso Elementary. Something unique about El Paso Elementary is the elementary school itself is an open concept classroom, which means that the teachers will actually be teaching together in the same room. Each will have their own homeroom class, but they will be really sharing the same space as they are teaching. A little bit about my interest in hobbies. One of the most important things to me is my family. This is a picture of them up in the top left. I also am a bulldog dad. I have two bulldogs, Otis and Gus. This is a picture of my fiance and I in at Mount Charleston in Las Vegas. We love to travel. Below is a picture of my class. It just represents my love for teaching, and I don't see myself wanting to do or doing anything else with my life. I love what I do, and I'm happy to be a teacher. I'm proud to be a teacher. This is also a picture of that represents like my love for learning. I love learning new things. Below, these are my teammates from last year. So we're no longer teammates anymore. However, I think this picture still represents like my love for working with people and just helping people. And then up in the top right is a picture of cooking because I love to cook. Not baking, just cooking. And then down below is a picture again of the world traveling because I do love traveling and exploring new places. Now we'll get into the meat of the assignment. So the first section was about school level government, and in this I thought about what are the financial responsibilities of a school principal, and I think one of the most financial responsibilities is to develop a school budget. And in the school budget it talked about there being two different kind of budgeting systems, which would be at the centralized budgeting or a decentralized budgeting. Centralized budgeting, it talked about how the district leadership it manages the budget and the spending. Talked a lot about like having district controlling the cost and how all of the money is spent. It also talked about how there are processes are in place. So let's say a local school needed to use money for some reason. In order to request that money, there would be a process of, does this meet the district's goals? Does this meet whatever their kind of direction is for the school district. It also talked about like even like how the money can be requested. So centralized budget was in summary, was a one size fits all way of budgeting, which there are pros to that. However, there are also cons to that. The decentralized budgeting was it spreads the management of the budget to various levels within a school district. So I look at this as like almost teaming with the budget. So the money is more close to the school, therefore that the school has more of a say of how the budget can be used or how the money can be used. I think there's a lot of pros to this, especially for those schools in those larger school districts, because whenever it's a one size fits all, sometimes students with those from those diverse populations, they get overlooked and the money doesn't support the schools the way the money needs to be used, or to the best of its ability. So that was the two different centralized versus decentralized budgeting. Another part of the financial, and really the reason why I talk about that there is because how the principal will develop the school budget really relies on, is the school district more a centralized budgeting, or are they more decentralized budgeting? Another thing that the school principal does is make sure the income is handled and governed by the relevant requirements and regulations, which means, is the school money being used um, based on how policy says it should be used? School districts or school principals will also keep accounts. They will work with the director of finance, and then also reporting the use of school funds to the relevant parties. I've seen this being done where the principal, whenever money is being raised through fundraising, that the principal communicates that out with the school board members, so they know what's happening with the money and where the money is coming from. The next section we'll talk about is student and adult success and well-being. One of the articles talked about the American Rescue Plan, which was the largest amount of federal relief provided to a school district, and it was to help schools reopen safely and to help students recover from their academic and mental health challenges due to COVID. Um, and though this was taking place in 2021, one of the things they said was, this is not just like a once you do it and then you kind of forget about it. It should be something that is, there's some continuity to it. Continuity, I think is how you say it. Anyways, the principal, and the question that I really focused on was, how can the principal make this money matter for the students, and or matter most for the students? And so these little points here I thought were good, not even just for the American Rescue Plan, but just for like in general of how you use the money, or if you get federal relief or you get a budget. I thought these were great. Like, ask districts to avoid the one size fits all approach, and engage the building principal and the leadership team to decide how to best use the funds. Give principals the opportunity to be the instructional leaders and advocates for student mental health challenges. And under that, I thought about, making sure that the principal has an opportunity to provide professional development, and if there is a need to increase staffing, that is something that they can do. Use the data to determine which student populations are in most need. So looking at not just like the diversity of the student populations, whether you're ELL, but even going down to like the grade levels. Is there a specific grade that is struggling more than other grades? How can we support those teachers, or are there supports that those students need? And then asking, what do the families and students say they need? So sending out a poll, creating some sort of site council so they can share what their needs might be. And then lastly, reminding the families that for example, the American Rescue Plan, it was a one lump sum of money. So it couldn't be something that would be used or guaranteed to get year after year after year. So um, sometimes asking for extra staff, I always believe in people over um, maybe resources, or people over like tools. But I think this kind of situation, you really can't use this money to hire new people or to create new positions, because that doesn't mean they're going to be funded for the upcoming school year. So data informed decisions, I'm going to talk about the money matters section of one of the articles, and it talked about there are three things that schools pulled data on where it did make an impact on student outcomes, and that was um, using money in a per pupil funding process, which means that if you increase the amount of money spending by 10% in all 12 school year ages, that there is at least a 7% increase of likelihood of students graduating, that resources do count. So smaller class sizes, additional instructional supports, early childhood education outcomes do improve the outcomes for students, especially those who are poor or in minority communities. Um, there was also a link to increased teacher wages, increasing student achievement. And then funding distribution is important. So level distribution across local public schools is also linked to improvement in student outcomes. And school in low socioeconomic or high poverty areas need additional funding to meet the needs of students. All right, and now we'll talk about two different sort of resource plans. The first one was a strategic school funding for results, and the second was student-based budgeting. So the strategic school funding for results, there was really three parts to it. Started at the school district, and it broke down how the school district um, manages their money or what their kind of role would be in managing the money. And they focus on the school funding, the school governance, and district support services. And then the school part of it was, what does the school leadership team want to do, or how will they use that money? And then by following those kind of set rules for those different locations, there are going to be greater success in student outcomes. The student-based budgeting, it talks about how when schools receive the money, it's kind of how it is budgeted. What's the way of budgeting it? And this SBB is how they what they called it is it focuses on the number of students enrolled and what their individual needs are. In this kind of way of budgeting the money, it maximizes the three pillars of high performing funding systems. And those three pillars are equity, transparency, and flexibility. So by following the SBB, it makes sure that the funding is distributed equally based on student needs, that the funding has a clear set of rules for where and how where, how, and why dollars are allocated, and it provides flexibility for the principals. However, flexibility doesn't guarantee student improvement, which I talked about that in my reflection. Lastly, we'll talk about the financial laws, policies, and regulations. And what I gathered from the articles is just, where does the money come from? 48% comes from state resources, which is mostly income tax, sales taxes, and fees. 44% is locally from property taxes. And then 8% comes from our federal sources. And these federal sources could be grants or fundings through programs like Title I, ELA, Reading First, IDEA, and then improving teacher quality grants. Here is my reflection. If you would like to pause it to gather what I reflected on. And lastly, these are my resources. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great Thursday.